Hey, this is Notser, and we're talking American light cruisers. I want to give my overall impression of the line itself. I've tested them all, I've shared my impressions, I've played multiple games, and I feel very confident in the version that we're getting in 7.6. We're in the Tier 10 American light cruiser, Worcester, on the map Warriors Path, and this is a pretty outstanding game. It will definitely reinforce all the points I'm going to be bringing up. So let's just get started. So, the American light cruiser line will be introduced in 7.6. We are getting the Cleveland in its Tier 8 version in 7.5, but the Dallas, Helena, Seattle, and Worcester will not be available until 7.6. Now that's disappointing to some, but they're still tweaking them, still trying to get any last-minute adjustments on the ships themselves, and I don't blame them. They need to be released in a state that players want to enjoy them, because I think light cruisers in general are probably one of the most fun experiences in the game. I've played the Mogami 155 forever, and it used to be an absolute monster. Stealth firing, advanced firing training, basic firing training, the works all affected the ship. Clearly, they nerfed it in the ground, along with some global nerfs to stealth firing and all that stuff. Regardless, though, light cruisers are very deadly. They benefit the most from inertia fuse high explosive. It allows them to cross multiple thresholds where their HE can do damage to targets. It's just, you couldn't do. You couldn't do damage to the bow or stern of battleships. There's a couple other interesting thresholds that you cross over. I think the 27 millimeter bow of the Des Moines, or that could be the 130 millimeter. Regardless, inertia fuse high explosive is very good for 150 to 155. It's an incredibly good skill. And I will be using it on pretty much all my light cruisers, as I have in all of these impression videos. But we've got the Dallas, Helena, the Cleveland at Tier 8, Tier 9, the Seattle, and then at Tier 10, the Worcester. And it just ramp ups the damage output potential. The rate of fire, the utility. These ships in particular will have the most utility available to cruisers in the game. We're talking 5 slots. It's a lot to take in. Be very careful not to fat finger, because if you fat finger, you are absolutely taking away one of the key tools that are available to you. But if you can get comfortable juggling all these things, you've got a lot of income, because it's going to be expensive to run premium at high tiers for these ships. The Seattle and the Worcester in particular, it's going to be very expensive. But if you can afford it, oh my god, it's insane. You have probably the best or the second best AA platform in the game. We also have access to radar, which of course is very useful. Heal, hydroacoustics, great for camping around islands and knowing full well that you are drawing so much attention from the enemy. Case in point, exactly like this. Now, that playstyle might not be compelling to watch, but it is certainly fun to play. And I feel like, as a player of light cruisers and a player of the game, it's different. It's different than most ships. Most ships don't like staying near islands and firing over them. We've obviously got the British cruisers and the American heavy cruisers that prefer that playstyle, but a lot of the ships just can't. Case in point, the Soviet cruiser line, they have too much gun velocity. They just can't operate near the island. So I appreciate that there are lines that play differently from one another. This is very different from the British cruiser line. Now, it could have been incredibly similar, and I might have some old NDA footage of the British cruisers when they had HE, but regardless, it's been, a year plus. We've played with the British cruisers. We know how the AP works. HE is a whole new ballpark when it comes to what to expect, because you're just going to burn things down. You think the Conqueror, the Lion, you think those are burning down ships? Oh no. Oh no. These light cruisers will be fire starters, even with inertia fuse high explosive. You are just putting so much HE shells downrange, and the enemy can't deal with it. This is your advantage. They have to do something else. If they commit to just slugging it out, 1 versus 1, you're going to outdamage them. These light cruisers, tier for tier, probably the highest damage in the game. Now, there is a huge trade-off for that damage, and it is they are glass cannons. They won't die to an alpha strike quite like the British cruisers, but they don't have the ability to recover like British cruisers do too, or the ability to use smoke. So it's a slightly different way of taking damage, but it is absolutely glass cannony. I have died so many times to a single broadside from an enemy battleship. It will punish you if you make one mistake and you're out in the open for one moment. The enemy will absolutely devastate you. And I think that's fair for the amount of damage output that you bring. The utility, all of that is wonderful for your team. And I think that's it's a compelling playstyle. I am just hoping that everything works out. Everyone enjoys the experience. It's not too powerful. It's not too weak. I feel like this will require a little bit more skill from the player to really get the absolute potential out of the ship because it is such a glass cannon build. And you really can't change that. For something like the British cruiser line, they have the ability to use smoke or radar. Smoke is a little bit more defensive. Radar is a little bit more aggressive. And you can make that choice. You can't make that choice here. You are stuck being out in the open if you fire. So that's why predominantly you're using islands. Clearly, a map like Ocean will not be a good map for the American light cruiser lines. But it's not a good map for a lot of lines right now. The American heavy cruiser line, they hate that map. A lot of ships hate a map without islands. So that's just one of the traits that makes me more interested in playing the line itself because it doesn't play quite like anything else. So it's really fun. It's really enjoyable. I've had a great time with every single tier. I feel like they definitely have clear strengths and clear weaknesses. And if a player has the knowledge, they can exploit it both ways. Please don't look at impression videos as the be-all end-all because the enemies have the least amount of information they will ever have against this particular ship, right? You can't look at something and legitimately critique the power level of a ship when, friend or foe, most players have no idea what to expect. They have no idea how the ship plays, they haven't seen it firsthand, and you're going to see games where, I do a ton of damage, almost 120 in 10 minutes, and it won't let up because the enemy is just throwing their bodies at me in a perfect position that they underestimated the power that this ship brought to this flank. Same with all the other teammates, and all these islands work beautifully for the ship. Tons of broadside, tons of AP, tons of HE opportunities. It's everywhere. It's absolutely everywhere, and it's absolutely devastating. But I'm going to assume that most of the time a player is going to get better after they've seen it firsthand. These guys are not going to underestimate them. They're going to be set up. They're going to be like, okay, well, this was a bad move, or this was a great move. Same with aircraft carriers, right? Everyone knows to not fly over a Minotaur or a Des Moines. But you don't know that until you've actually experienced just how devastating it is, really. You hear whispers, oh, yeah. But once you've experienced these ships, you'll have a better understanding of them. And I hope that everyone at least gives them a try, because I have been on the light cruiser bandwagon since the very beginning, since the Mogami was at tier 7. I loved it then, I love it now. The only thing I don't like about the Mogami is that in order to do the light cruiser playstyle, most of the time you're a tier 8 in a tier 10 match. You're going to get just destroyed because you lack either any potential to mitigate the damage as much as other ships, the heal and all that stuff. So introducing a light cruiser line that has a tier 9 and a tier 10 with heal is attractive. It definitely is. I hope that at some point we get more Mogamis, because I love the Mogami. I'm sure many of you don't love the Mogami, but it's exciting to get this light cruiser line, right? And you can see I'm using my radar, great concealment. The radar to concealment ratio is almost 1-to-1, so if you spot a target or are spotted, you can use radar to your advantage. That's attractive. A lot of the Soviet cruisers, you can't really do the same thing because you have terrible concealment, or you didn't go a concealment build because you needed that range in order to avoid damage. But not here. More radar is going to be unattractive to DDs, and as a DD main, you know, obviously I like light cruisers. I enjoy light cruisers. What is my impressions? How do I feel like the meta is going to shift? Well, depending on how much the DD menace takes hold, continues to ramp up, right? There's more DDs being played than there was back in the day. 3, 4, 5. Light cruisers will put them in their place. You will die to light cruisers before you can even hide from the radar. That's a guarantee. Cleveland, Seattle, Worcester, they will all absolutely devastate DDs very quickly. Only a couple salvos and you're dead. So I think it's a really good counterbalance to a DD heavy meta, which honestly I kind of feel like we were in, or we were going to be in, and then the rank season hit and everyone was doing a last stand, you know, save the star. But I think when rank and clan isn't there, I think the general play style is 3 to 5 DDs, a couple cruisers, and heavy battleship with almost no aircraft carriers. So anytime that there is a heavy DD meta, these light cruisers will pull them back. It's a great design for that. There are counters to it. These light cruisers hate battleships. Absolutely hate them. And battleships hate them. Because just as devastating as they are to the cruisers are burning them to the ground. Absolutely burning to the ground. But concentrated battleship firepower on a cruiser that's out in the open, hit a light cruiser out in the open, you're gone. You're absolutely gone. So it's going to be a cool glass cannony, high risk, high reward line that will be introduced in 7.6. I can't wait to experience it with all of you experiencing it as well. I hope that you've enjoyed all of the American Light Cruiser impression videos. They are impressions, and I'm not saying that this is the best build or this is the absolute best way to play it, but my impression is this is the direction you need to go, or this is the direction the game is telling you to go, and it seems to work pretty well. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll catch you next time.